I'm Samantha Sinclair, and this is my Level 2 group score presentation for the Tamalpa Institute. In this presentation, I'll share a bit of my story and how it relates to my offering, and then I'll walk you through my score for a workshop on self-care for caregivers. At 3, I was a fearless creative explorer. Life was my canvas. I painted with food. I tasted paste. I told fantastical tales. I sang to flowers, and I once even crawled under a fence to try to pet a bull. I was unstoppable. And then school, culture shock after all that wild freedom. It was so difficult to feel institutionalized, so stifling. My first grade teacher actually required my classmates and I to sign contracts agreeing to play with certain things on certain days. I violated my contract when it was a crayon day for me and I decided to play with clay. I got paddled for it and I never forgot that. It actually took 23 years for me to have the courage to touch clay again, if you can believe that. And I remember this incident as the Plato Rebellion of 1974 as I broke the law for my art. Smash cut, I'm in grad school. I petitioned my advisor to allow me to create and exhibit some collages to illustrate my experience in between the lines of my academic research. This is a crop from a piece called Headway. It represents how I felt then, really disconnected from my body, burned out, isolated. And when my professors and colleagues witnessed my collages, I felt seen and validated. One of my professors was transpersonal psychologist Stan Groff, a pioneer in psychedelic research, with whom I later went on to be trained to lead holotropic breathwork journeys. After a breathwork journey, participants create a mandala. Here's a mandala I created of my mother and I as birds. My mother is known as the falcon. Just like the Tamalpa life art process, the rendering that you do, the mandala captures the psychic fragments that emerge during the process that are then woven into a meaningful and clarifying narrative. January 2012, I will never forget because I was diagnosed with the big C. Getting cancer was the proverbial smack with a 2x4 wake up call to make drastic changes in the way I was living. I couldn't live as a disembodied head any longer. Body, I bargained, I hear you. I'll do whatever it takes to heal. I opted for traditional Western medical treatment, and I also explored other healing modalities like ecstatic dance, hypnotherapy, meditation, yoga, chanting, vision quest. I did sacred singing, and collage making was my primary medium. I did find an article by Anna Halpern on her cancer journey that led me to the Tamalpa Institute, where I took an introductory workshop at the Mountain Home Studio. It was such a powerful place to do that. Making art really allowed me to get out of this constant fixation with my illness and just lose myself in the nourishing flow of creative expression. And the experience was so profound and healing that I vowed then and there to become a facilitator of the work someday. So another part of my healing path was to create art and rituals with friends. One of my friends invited me to the Poet Treehouse, this art collective where other artists and some of my friends all gathered to make art on behalf of my cancer. One of my friends drew this butterfly on my throat to remind me the importance of speaking my truth, something that I felt was at issue in me becoming ill. I made a collage of me as a lioness to gather courage for my treatment, which involved multiple surgeries, radiation, and chemo. Another friend painted the likeness of my healed breast with a beautiful, colorful scar. And then another friend made a paper mache bust of my bust. And I decorated it with words that I wanted to release. And then we burned it on a bonfire on the beach. And I think of the goddess Kali and how fiercely she transmutes evil by eating it. The artistic rituals we created really devoured the psychic energy of my cancer. So I joined an expressive arts therapy group to get emotional support. Here's a mask I made in group. Making art there really gave me a place to overcome my feeling of isolation. Illness can bring that up. I had that experience of grad school feeling isolated, but I also felt somewhat isolated in being ill. And then showing our art in the group really helped us be seen and our humanness without judgment. This is another collage that I made. It's called Grief. I discovered a lot of layers of grief, anger, sadness, resentment, and regret. And once I could fully stand in the depth of my pain, I began to experience hope. This is a piece I made that represents hope, being hopeful while still sitting with the grief. I forgave old grievances with myself and others, and then that allowed me to carry the grief while lightening my emotional load. So I even took on the archetypal energy of the jester to embody play and truth-telling through mask making and dramatic enactment. In 2014, 2 years after my diagnosis, doctors proclaimed me cured, yet I knew I was not fully healed. I followed my own self-care prescription of creative embodied expression to keep my life force flowing. And I think of my little 7-year-old hands gleefully squishing clay and then being beaten for it and being so confused by the experience. And is it any wonder that art making felt really dangerous to me? And it was something that I didn't let myself enjoy for so many years. And I still persist. I persisted through my cancer, and I persist today. With every creative act, I'm becoming the one who expresses herself freely through her art. Post-cancer, I continued to inhabit more of my body, what I call my heavy spirit, my integrated body, mind, and soul. I also began earthing, a practice of touching the earth with my feet and hands while spending time in nature. Research supports that earthing reduces inflammation, it increases immunity, and it speeds up the healing of wounds. So the image on the left was a part of a digital collage series my friend artist Jonathan Levine created for me entitled Awakening, in honor of the rite of passage that cancer turned out to be for me. And on the right, it's a shot I took of myself in anatomy class in a yoga teacher training. I was continuing my commitment to learning embodied healing modality. And then pre-cancer, I really didn't have the guts to call myself an artist. I felt that was the world of fine artists for a product, and you had to have a certain quality of work. But post-cancer, my recovery journey led me to reclaim creative expression as my birthright, and I began to unapologetically call myself an artist. I even finished 2 creativity coach certifications during that time so I could support other frustrated would-be artists to unleash their muse. Now at 54, 10 years after my diagnosis, I remain cancer-free. I'm now walking with my father on his cancer journey. With the pandemic and so much personal loss in the past 2 years, I recognize an urgent need for me to balance caring for others and caring for self. So I chose to offer a self-care workshop for women caregivers who may be disconnected from their bodies and longing for some support. Many women caregivers soldier on, stuffing their emotions and ignoring their physical needs. Often they feel that creating is a luxury they can't afford. When the pandemic officially began in 2020, the entire world was forced to adapt to SARS-2. The impact varied really depending on social identity context. Death, unemployment, financial ruin, divorce, displacement were commonplace tragedies that people experienced in the wake of the pandemic. Overwork became kind of the norm when people got back into that groove if they were lucky enough to get employment again. And many people rebelled. There's something called the Great Resignation. So many people felt burned out by the overwork they were experiencing that they just didn't want to get back on that burnout train. So there's really an urgent need for a self-care themed workshop, in my view, to support caregivers, to digest the stress they're experiencing physically, emotionally, and mentally through art making. So now I'd like to break down my group score, a workshop called The Art of Self-Care for Women Caregivers. I imagine 8 participants, and it will take place in Rivet Park, a park around the corner from my house. The theme is connection to self through art and movement. And the activities are the 3 levels of awareness, the communication model, the psychokinetic imagery process, and the 5-part process. It will occur on a Wednesday between 10 to 12 a.m. with an hour lunch, and then back from 1 to 3 for the last 2 hours of the workshop. We will have a lunch, brown bag lunch, that we'll share together. The materials used will be cray pod, drawing pad, some journal, and a yoga mat. And I also my intention is to create a safe space for the participants to inhabit their bodies with an integrated awareness of physical, emotional, and mental levels using the Tamalpa framework. So this is Rithik Park at 10 a.m. Be welcoming the participants to get settled on the grass. I'll be introducing myself. I imagine having drums playing, maybe drum music, something kind of grounding in the background, and allowing everyone to take their seat. I'll be explaining my intention, the purpose of the workshop. Don't expect that to take a long time because I want to prepare people in advance. And then I'll share a preview of the day and create some agreements with everyone. It should be a total of 10 minutes in my view. 10:10 introductions and intention of each participant. Each participant will share their name and what brought them to the circle. About 2 minutes each, so about 16 minutes to 20 minutes. Allow a little extra time in case that's needed. At 10:30, warm up with music. I'll invite the participants to close their eyes, do a simple warm up lying on their back. They'll be focusing on the breath, naming the body parts to relax the head down to the toes. Then have them move into a fetal position, stand, pulsing, and then shaking to raise their energy. Inviting them to understand the 3 levels of awareness. They're going to be I'll be playing the tempo, force, angles. I'll be asking them to notice how they're arriving. How is their physical body arriving? Their emotional body, their feelings and sensations. Asking them to notice if any pictures or a word comes up or any thoughts. And then have them land on a movement, gesture, or phrase. Then at 10:40, I will invite the participants to move to their drawing pad and have them create a drawing for their 3 levels of awareness. I have allotted 30 minutes for this, so they really get a sense for how to depict that. I will invite them to consider they might draw the gesture or movement phrase or something else that represents the 3 levels of awareness for how they are arriving. Then we'll take a break, just a short break. 11:15, I'm going to be doing some teaching on aesthetic response, the communication model. I'll be demoing that. I see, I feel, I sense, I imagine for about 10 minutes. 11:30 a.m., putting people in duets. Person A is going to be showing their drawing and answers if your drawing could speak, what would it say for 2 minutes? And then person A moves the drawing for 2 minutes. And person B, the witness, will share their aesthetic response using the communication model. I see, I feel, I imagine for 6 minutes. And then they'll be switching. At 12 o'clock, we're going to break for lunch. It's going to be a brown bag. We'll be eating together for 30 minutes. And then it's an invitation. We don't have to, but if the participants would like to stay together for a half hour, they can, or they can take the full time to themselves. But it will only be a half hour that we'll be together. At 1 p.m., we'll return from lunch and we'll start the 5-part process. Identify. We'll be beginning with a guided visualization to assist the participants in identifying the biggest challenge or opportunity they are experiencing around self-care. That should be around 5 minutes. Then I'll instruct them to create a drawing that can be literal or non-literal that represents that challenge or opportunity. And when they're complete with the drawing, I'll invite them to give the drawing a title. That should be about 25 minutes. At 1:30, moving into confront, I'll instruct the participants to face their drawing and begin to move shapes, symbols, colors, also known as keys, or the whole drawing. I'll coach them to add sound and to move until they've completely experienced the drawing. That should be about 10 minutes. And then at 1:40, we'll move to release. I'll coach the participants to find a movement phrase that feels as though they're breaking through. I'll invite them to explore muscle tone, force, and to use their space. I'll also invite them to add words and sounds of breaking through. At 1:50 p.m., we'll move to change. I'll guide the participants to find a new movement, inviting them to find one that naturally flows from the previous one. If they're stuck, I might prompt if you could choose a movement, what might it be? I'll also continue to invite them to find a sound to accompany the new movement, and then I'll invite them to make the sound and movement together a few times. I'll coach them to land on a gesture or movement phrase to complete the exploration, and I'll prompt them to notice any images or words that accompany the movement. Then I'll have them lie on their backs like a starfish and notice body sensations, feelings, and emotions. At 2 p.m., we'll move to the drawing pad. I'll invite the participants to do a sketch of how they feel about their challenge or opportunity now. That should be about 10 minutes. At 2:10, I'll invite the participants to move the drawing to imprint it into their psychosomatic awareness. That should be about a couple of minutes. And then at 2:12, we'll move to growth. For growth, they'll be writing. I'll be guiding the participants to write a letter to themselves, giving specific examples of how they'll apply what they've experienced in this exercise in their lives. That should be about 8 minutes. At 2:20, the group is going to come together again, and each participant will be showing their drawing for 1 minute and then share for 2 minutes a little piece of their writing. This should be about a 25-minute experience. At 2:25, the participants are going to tune into their 3 levels of awareness and notice how they are departing the circle. I'll be inviting them to share how they're leaving or what they're taking with them that will support them moving forward. At 2:29, with outstretched arms, palm to palm in a small circle, we're going to raise the arms above the head and pop to release the gathered energy. Should be a minute or so. And then at 3 p.m., I will be inviting the participants to stay to learn about the next class in the series, or the next series of classes. So the next series will be Nourish to Flourish. It's a 7-week class series building upon the first, moving into the body part mapping. Class 1 will be legs and feet, balance and grounding. Class 2 will be abdomen for digestion and gut feeling. Class 3 will be spine for exploration of postures, such as taking a stand. Class 4 will be rib cage, taking in and letting out. Class 5 will be arms and hands, what am I longing for? And Class 6 will be head, mask and mask. Class 7 will be pelvis, inhibition, and play. So that is my group score for the Art of Self-Care workshop and a preview of my 7-week series, Nourish to Flourish. I hope to offer the self-care workshop to cancer patients once I have fully mastered the score and feel I have a level of proficiency. I would like to fold in more retreat elements to have it feel more nourishing, like meditation, yoga of the voice, storytelling. I'd also like to adapt this for different caregiving sectors like animal rehabilitators, mental health care professionals, nurses, for example, assisted living facility workers. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch my presentation. I look forward to your feedback. Until we meet again, be well.